Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Alexander Sanford stood in his home office, studying the quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk. At 38, he had built Sanford cybersecurity from the ground up, transforming a one-man operation into a company that protected Fortune 500 corporations from digital threats. His background in military intelligence had served him well. Alexander understood that in both war and business, information was power. The house reflected his success, a sprawling colonial in Westchester County with 8 bedrooms, a pool, and enough land to ensure privacy. But success had come at a cost. The long hours building his empire had created distance in his marriage to Nicole, though he'd assumed their foundation was solid enough to weather any storm. "Dad, can you help me with my science project?" 11-year-old Emma bounded into the office, her auburn hair, inherited from Nicole, catching the afternoon light. Emma was brilliant, perhaps too brilliant for her age. She possessed an unsettling ability to understand adult conversations and motivations that sometimes made Alexander wonder if she'd inherited more than just his analytical mind. "Of course, sweetheart. What's the topic?" "Cause and effect," Emma said, her green eyes twinkling with mischief. "How small actions can create big consequences." Alexander smiled, unaware of the irony. That's a fundamental principle in both science and life. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. As they worked together, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. "Working late again. Don't wait up." It was the 5th time this month. Their marriage had been rocky lately. Nicole complained about his work hours, his emotional distance, his failure to live in the moment. She'd started therapy with Dr. Sarah Calderon, claiming she needed to find herself. Alexander had supported it, hoping it would help her adjust to their lifestyle. What he didn't know was that Nicole had already found what she was looking for, in the form of Blake Jenkins, a 32-year-old personal trainer with charm, good looks, and a talent for convincing wealthy women that their husbands didn't appreciate them. "Dad," Emma said quietly, "sometimes people show you who they really are, but you have to be watching carefully to see it." Alexander looked at his daughter, struck by the weight of her words. "That's very wise, Em. Where did you learn that?" "I watch people," she replied simply. "I see patterns. Like in your cybersecurity work. You find the vulnerabilities before the bad guys do, right?" "Exactly. Maybe someone should do that for families too." That evening, as Alexander reviewed security protocols for a new client, he couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was trying to tell him something important. His military training had taught him to trust his instincts, but the idea that his 11-year-old daughter might see threats he'd missed seemed impossible. Nicole returned home at nearly midnight, claiming the client dinner had run long. She kissed his cheek perfunctorily and headed straight to their bedroom. Alexander noticed she'd started sleeping on the far edge of their king-size bed, creating an invisible barrier between them. As he locked up the house, Alexander paused outside Emma's room. The light under her door suggested she was still awake, probably reading. Emma had always been a night owl, much like him. He knocked softly. "Come in, Dad." She was indeed reading, but not a children's book. Instead, she held a copy of The Art of War by Sun Tzu. "Interesting choice for bedtime reading," Alexander observed. "Know your enemy," Emma quoted. "Sun Tzu says the supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy without fighting." "And who's your enemy?" Emma looked at him with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. "Sometimes the enemy is already inside the castle, Dad. Sometimes they've been there all along, waiting for the right moment to attack." Alexander felt a chill run down his spine. "Emma, is there something you want to tell me?" "Not yet," she said, closing the book. "But soon, when you're ready to see what's really happening." That night, Alexander lay awake staring at the ceiling, his wife breathing steadily beside him. Emma's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes the enemy is already inside the castle. His analytical mind began connecting dots he hadn't wanted to see. Nicole's late nights, her emotional distance, her newfound interest in fitness classes, the expensive lingerie he'd found in her drawer that she'd never worn for him. But Alexander Sanford hadn't survived military intelligence operations and built a successful company by jumping to conclusions. If there was a threat to his family, he would identify it methodically, gather evidence, and neutralize it with precision. What he didn't realize was that Emma had already begun that process for him. Chapter 2. The Breach. The discovery came on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered with surgical precision. Alexander had awakened early for a conference call with clients in Tokyo when he noticed his laptop security software had flagged unusual activity on their home network. Someone had been accessing their financial accounts using Nicole's credentials. His first instinct was concern. Perhaps Nicole's information had been compromised. But as he dug deeper, the timestamps told a different story. The access occurred during Nicole's supposed therapy sessions with Dr. Calderon. But the geolocation data showed the login coming from an apartment complex 20 miles away. Alexander's military training kicked in. Instead of confronting Nicole immediately, he began systematic surveillance. He installed discrete monitoring software on their shared devices and began tracking Nicole's movements. What he discovered over the next week shattered 15 years of marriage. Nicole wasn't having an affair. She was conducting a carefully orchestrated robbery. Working with Blake Jenkins, she had been systematically photographing financial documents, copying passwords, and preparing to drain their accounts. Blake, it turned out, wasn't just a personal trainer. He was a grifter with a history of targeting wealthy women, though his previous victims had never been married to someone with Alexander's background. The apartment complex was Blake's base of operations, where he kept records on multiple marks. Through his cybersecurity connections, Alexander learned that Blake had worked this scheme on at least 6 other women over the past 3 years, disappearing before their husbands could react. But this time, Blake had chosen the wrong target. "Dad, you look upset," Emma observed over breakfast on Saturday morning. Nicole was upstairs, allegedly getting ready for another therapy session. "Just work stress, sweetheart." Emma studied him with those penetrating green eyes. "You know, in my science project research, I learned that the best defense is often a good offense, especially when someone thinks they have the element of surprise." Before Alexander could respond, Nicole appeared, dressed casually but carrying a large gym bag, far more than needed for a therapy session. "I'll be back late," she announced, avoiding eye contact. "Dr. Calderon wants to try some intensive work today." After she left, Alexander turned to Emma. "How long have you known?" Emma's mask of childhood innocence finally slipped. "I've been watching Mom for 2 months. I know about Blake. I know about their plan. And I know they're going to empty your accounts and disappear next Tuesday while you're in Seattle for the Morrison contract signing." Alexander felt pride and concern war in his chest. His daughter had inherited his analytical skills, but she was still just 11 years old. "Emma, this isn't a game. These people are dangerous." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I've been preparing." "Preparing how?" Emma pulled out a tablet and showed him a folder labeled Operation Checkmate. Inside were detailed files on Blake Jenkins, including his real name, Benjamin Schroeder, his criminal history, photos of his apartment, and what appeared to be evidence of his other victims. "How did you?" "I learned from a best," Emma said with a slight smile. "You taught me about research, about finding vulnerabilities, about thinking 3 steps ahead. You just never thought I need to use those skills to protect our family." Alexander realized his daughter had been conducting her own investigation, using skills that would have impressed his military colleagues. But more importantly, she'd been protecting him while he was blind to the threat. "What's your plan?" he asked, treating her as the partner she'd clearly become. "Simple. We let them think their plan is working. We let them take the money, and then we make sure they never enjoy a single dollar of it." That afternoon, while Nicole was presumably draining their accounts with Blake, Alexander and Emma put their counter-operation into motion. Alexander transferred the bulk of their assets to secure accounts Nicole couldn't access, leaving just enough in the monitored accounts to make the theft look successful. Meanwhile, Emma had been gathering intelligence on Blake's network, discovering connections to other crimes that would ensure he faced federal charges. But their plan went beyond simple recovery. Emma had studied Blake's pattern and realized he always fled to a specific location after each score, a property in the Cayman Islands purchased under a shell company. She'd already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, providing them with evidence of Blake's interstate fraud operations. The beautiful thing about criminals, Emma explained as they reviewed their strategy, is that they're usually not as smart as they think they are. Blake thinks he's been careful, but he's left digital footprints everywhere. Sunday evening, Nicole returned home with forced cheerfulness, playing the loving wife one last time. She cooked Alexander's favorite dinner, suggested they plan a vacation together, and made love to him with passion that felt desperate and final. Alexander played his part perfectly, letting Nicole believe she was fooling him. But as she slept beside him that final night, he felt nothing but cold determination. Nicole had chosen her path. Now she would face the consequences. "Tomorrow's going to be interesting," Emma whispered when she found him in his office late that night. "Are you ready for this?" Alexander asked his daughter. "Dad, I've been ready since the day I realized Mom was choosing a stranger over our family. The question is, are you ready to stop being the nice guy and start being the man who protects what matters?" Alexander looked at his 11-year-old daughter, brilliant, fierce, and loyal in ways Nicole had never been, and realized she was right. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to remind Blake Jenkins and Nicole why nobody should ever underestimate a Sanford. Chapter 3. The Vanishing Act. Monday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Alexander left for his Seattle trip right on schedule, kissing Nicole goodbye at the door while Emma watched from the kitchen, her tablet discreetly recording everything. "I'll miss you," Nicole murmured against his lips, and Alexander marveled at how convincingly she played the loving wife even as she prepared to betray him. "I'll be back Thursday," he replied, knowing full well he'd never return to this version of his life. But Alexander didn't board the flight to Seattle. Instead, he drove to a safe house he'd maintained since his military days, a small apartment in Queens registered under a corporate identity. From there, he watched the digital trap spring. At 11:47 a.m., Nicole accessed their primary checking account from Blake's apartment. At 12:15 p.m., she initiated transfers totaling $847,000 to accounts Blake had prepared. At 12:43 p.m., she withdrew another $50,000 in cash from 3 different banks. At 1:30 p.m., Nicole Sanford and Blake Jenkins disappeared. What they didn't know was that Emma had hacked Blake's phone 3 days earlier, installing tracking software that would make him visible to law enforcement across 3 federal agencies. The money they'd stolen was real, but every transaction was being monitored, photographed, and logged as evidence. By Tuesday afternoon, Alexander received the call he'd been expecting. "Mr. Sanford, this is Detective Miguel York with the Westchester County Police. I'm afraid I have some difficult news about your wife." Alexander played his part perfectly. The shocked husband, the confused victim, the man whose world had just collapsed. He cut his business trip short and rushed home to find Emma waiting with a neighbor, tears in her eyes that were only partially manufactured. "She left this," Emma said, handing him a note written in Nicole's handwriting. "Alexander, I'm sorry it has to end this way, but I can't live this life anymore. I need something real, something passionate. Blake makes me feel alive in ways I've forgotten were possible. I know this hurts, but you'll be better off without me. Take care of Emma." It was a masterpiece of manipulation, Nicole's attempt to paint herself as a woman following her heart rather than a calculating thief. But Alexander recognized Blake's psychological profile in every line. The man was skilled at making his victims believe they were choosing love over money, even as he robbed them blind. "Dad," Emma said when they were alone, "I'm sorry about Mom." "Are you?" Alexander asked, studying his daughter's face. Emma considered the question seriously. "I'm sorry she chose to be the kind of person who would hurt us. I'm sorry she wasn't strong enough to be the mother I needed. But I'm not sorry she's gone, because now we can be the family we're supposed to be." That evening, as Alexander tucked Emma into bed, she handed him her tablet. "You want to see this?" The screen showed a live feed from Blake's apartment, courtesy of the surveillance equipment Emma had somehow managed to install. Nicole and Blake were celebrating their success, counting cash, and planning their escape to the Cayman Islands. How did you? I told you I've been watching them. I also told you I learned from the best. Emma's smile was razor sharp. Blake's been teaching Mom that rich wives are easy targets because they're isolated and trusting. What he didn't realize is that this rich wife has a daughter who understands exactly how predators work. On the screen, Blake was explaining to Nicole how they'd lay low for a few weeks before moving the money offshore. Nicole laughed at something he said, and Alexander felt the last vestige of love for his wife die. 3 days, Emma said quietly. In 3 days, Blake always makes his move to the final destination. That's when the FBI will be waiting. And if they run earlier, they can't. I made sure of that. Emma's voice carried a cold satisfaction that reminded Alexander exactly whose daughter she was. Let's just say Blake's going to have some transportation difficulties if he tries to leave ahead of schedule. Wednesday morning brought the first crack in Blake's confidence. His Porsche wouldn't start. Something about water in the gas tank. His backup car, a BMW registered to one of his shell companies, had mysteriously developed brake problems overnight. And the private jet he'd chartered for Thursday morning had received an anonymous tip about potential drug smuggling that would keep it grounded for federal inspection. By Wednesday afternoon, Blake was paranoid and Nicole was panicking. Through the surveillance feed, Alexander watched his wife of 15 years break down as she realized she'd traded her family for a criminal who might not be able to deliver on his promises. Maybe we should go back, Nicole suggested on the feed. Tell Alexander it was a mistake, that I was having a breakdown. Blake's response revealed his true nature. You think he's going to take you back after you robbed him? You think that little brat daughter of yours is going to welcome you home? You're mine now, Nicole. We finished this my way. The mask was off. Blake's charm disappeared, replaced by cold calculation and barely contained violence. Nicole had finally seen the man she'd chosen over her family, and the realization was destroying her. She made her choice, Emma said, watching her mother weep on the screen. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Thursday morning, Alexander received the call he'd been waiting for. Dad, don't worry. I handled it. You just wait. Emma's voice was calm, confident, and utterly unlike a normal 11-year-old. But then again, Emma Sanford had never been normal. What did you do? I activated the final phase. By tonight, Blake and Mom will be in federal custody. By next week, Blake will be facing charges in 6 states. And Mom, Emma paused. Mom will learn what it really costs to betray the people who love you. That evening, as they waited for the dominoes to fall, Alexander looked at his daughter, brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely loyal, and realized she was exactly the partner he needed for whatever came next. The war was just beginning, and the Sanford family was going to win. Chapter 4. The Trap Springs. Friday morning shattered Nicole's world with the precision of a surgical strike. She awakened in Blake's apartment to find federal agents surrounding the building, their black SUVs blocking every exit. Through the window, she could see snipers on adjacent rooftops and knew with sinking certainty that Blake's carefully crafted escape plan had become their prison. Blake! Nicole shook him awake, her voice hoarse with panic. There are FBI agents everywhere. Blake's transformation from lover to predator was immediate. Gone was the charming man who'd convinced her to abandon her family. In his place stood Benjamin Schroeder, a career criminal facing life in federal prison. This is your fault, he snarled, grabbing Nicole's arm hard enough to bruise. You said your husband was just some tech geek who wouldn't fight back. He is. Alexander doesn't even know we're here. But Blake's paranoid mind was already spinning theories. Nobody finds me this fast unless they've been tracking me from the beginning. Your husband played you, Nicole. He knew about us all along. Meanwhile, 20 miles away in Westchester County, Alexander sat at his home office reviewing the FBI raid in real time through Emma's surveillance network. His daughter had exceeded every expectation, orchestrating a takedown that would have impressed his former intelligence colleagues. How did you coordinate all this? Alexander asked, genuinely curious about Emma's methodology. I started with Blake's financial records, Emma explained, pulling up files on her tablet. He uses a property management company in Miami that handles his overseas transactions. Once I had their system access, I could trace every victim, every stolen dollar, every illegal transfer. The scope of her investigation was staggering. Emma had connected Blake to a network of 23 victims across 7 states, fraudulent bank accounts in 12 countries, and enough evidence to ensure federal prosecutors would be fighting over jurisdiction rights. The FBI had been chasing Blake for 18 months, Emma continued, but they couldn't pin him down because he kept changing identities and locations. I gave them a GPS tracker that never lies, financial records that prove intent, and enough digital evidence to convict him 10 times over. Alexander felt a mixture of pride and concern. Emma, what you've accomplished is incredible, but this level of planning, this kind of analysis, you're 11 years old. Where did this come from? Emma's expression grew serious. Dad, remember when Mom started pulling away from us last year? I knew something was wrong, but you were working so much you couldn't see it. So I started watching, learning, preparing for whatever was coming. She pulled up another file, this one containing months of observations about Nicole's behavior patterns, phone records, and financial activities. I knew Mom was planning something big. I just didn't know it was theft until I hacked her text messages 3 months ago. Once I saw the conversations with Blake, I realized we were dealing with a professional criminal, not just an affair. Alexander studied his daughter's work, recognizing tactical thinking that rivaled his own. You've been protecting this family for months. Someone had to, Emma replied simply. And I knew if I told you too early, you might have tried to save Mom instead of stopping her. The live feed from Blake's apartment showed FBI agents breaching the door with practiced efficiency. Blake tried to run, but found every exit blocked. Nicole, still in her pajamas, dropped to her knees as agents shouted commands and drew weapons. Nicole Sanford, Benjamin Schroeder, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and interstate transportation of stolen funds, the lead agent announced. Blake's final act of cowardice was to point at Nicole and claim she'd masterminded everything. She planned it all. She had access to the accounts. She knew her husband's passwords. I was just helping her start a new life. Nicole's face went white as she realized Blake was sacrificing her to save himself. The man she betrayed her family for was throwing her to the wolves without hesitation. That's not true, Nicole screamed. Blake planned everything. He told me how to access the accounts. He set up the transfers. But the agents had heard these claims countless times before. They'd read Blake's pattern of manipulation, studied his method of making victims feel complicit in their own destruction. Nicole's protests only confirmed what the evidence already proved. She was another mark who'd been expertly played. Alexander's phone rang as the arrest concluded. The caller ID showed Nicole's number, but her voice was barely recognizable through the tears and panic. Alexander, please, you have to help me. This is all a mistake. Blake made me do it. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. I love Emma. I just got confused. Nicole, Alexander's voice was perfectly calm. You emptied our bank accounts and disappeared with a criminal. That's not confusion. That's theft. But you don't understand. Blake said, Blake is a con artist who targeted you because he thought you'd be easy to manipulate. Unfortunately for both of you, he was wrong about our family. The call ended with Nicole's sobbing pleas echoing in the background. Alexander felt no satisfaction in her suffering, only the cold certainty that justice was finally being served. She's going to prison, isn't she? Emma asked, watching the news coverage of the arrests. Yes. Federal charges for fraud of this magnitude typically carry 20-year sentences. Emma nodded thoughtfully. Good. People need to understand there are consequences for betraying the people who love them. That evening, as Alexander tucked Emma into bed, she handed him a final folder from her investigation. What's this? Blake's other victims. Names, addresses, stolen amounts. I thought they might want their money back. Inside were detailed profiles of 23 women Blake had robbed over the past 5 years. Emma had tracked down their current locations, documented their losses, and prepared evidence packages that would help prosecutors recover their stolen assets. You want to return their money? It's the right thing to do, Emma said simply. Besides, when Blake goes to trial, we'll need those women to testify. Making them whole again ensures their cooperation. Alexander looked at his 11-year-old daughter and realized she understood justice in ways that would have impressed Supreme Court justices. Emma hadn't just stopped a crime. She'd architected a comprehensive solution that would heal Blake's damage while ensuring he could never hurt anyone again. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "We make a good team," Emma replied. "But this isn't over yet. Blake still has allies out there, and Mom's going to try to make a deal with prosecutors. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." Alexander kissed his daughter's forehead and turned off the lights, but sleep would not come easily. Emma was right. This war was far from over. Nicole and Blake had been captured, but their defeat was only the beginning of a longer battle. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Chapter 5: Damage Control. The media circus began at dawn. News vans lined the street outside Alexander's home, reporters shoving microphones at anyone who approached the property. The story had everything that sold papers: a wealthy tech executive, a cheating wife, a charming con artist, and enough stolen money to fund a small country's economy. "Mr. Sanford, can you comment on your wife's arrest? How long did you know about the affair? Do you feel responsible for missing the warning signs?" Alexander ignored them all, focusing instead on the more pressing problem of Blake's criminal network. Emma's investigation had revealed that Blake wasn't working alone. He was part of a sophisticated operation that targeted wealthy families across the country. "Dad, we have a problem," Emma announced, bursting into his office with her tablet. Blake made bail. Alexander's blood ran cold. Federal judges rarely granted bail for flight risk defendants facing decades in prison. Ow! Someone posted a $2 million bond through a shell company. The same shell company that owns 6 other properties Blake's been using as safe houses. Emma pulled up a complex financial diagram showing Blake's connections to a larger criminal organization. At the center was a man named Dominic Stewart, a wealthy investor who'd been using Blake's romance scams to identify high-value targets for more sophisticated crimes. Blake wasn't just stealing money, Emma explained. He was gathering intelligence for Stewart's organization. They've been targeting tech executives specifically, looking for cybersecurity vulnerabilities and corporate secrets. Alexander studied the files, recognizing the tactical sophistication of a professional intelligence operation. "They wanted access to my company." "Exactly. Stewart's group specializes in industrial espionage. They use romance scams to get close to executives, then leverage the relationships to access sensitive corporate data." The implications were staggering. Nicole hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She'd unknowingly participated in a plan to steal trade secrets from Sanford Cybersecurity. Alexander's company protected some of the most sensitive networks in corporate America. Access to his systems could compromise national security. "Emma, this is bigger than we thought. We need to contact the FBI immediately." "Already done," Emma replied, showing him a secure message thread with Agent Rick Henderson, the FBI's lead investigator on Blake's case. "I sent him everything we have on Stewart's network about an hour ago." Alexander stared at his daughter in amazement. "You've been in contact with federal agents?" "Since last week." Agent Henderson was very impressed with my analysis of Blake's operations. He said I have exceptional analytical capabilities for someone my age. Before Alexander could respond, his secure phone rang. The caller ID showed a blocked number, but the voice was one he recognized from his military days. "Alexander, this is General Patrick Thornton from the Defense Intelligence Agency. We need to talk." 20 minutes later, General Thornton sat in Alexander's living room, reviewing Emma's files with growing concern. Alexander had served under Thornton during his final deployment, and the general's presence meant this situation had escalated beyond civilian law enforcement. "Your daughter's investigation has uncovered something we've been tracking for 2 years, Thornton explained. Stewart's organization has been targeting defense contractors and cybersecurity firms across the country. They've already compromised at least 12 companies with access to classified government networks." Emma perked up with interest. "How many people are in their network?" "We estimate 47 operatives across 15 states. Blake Jenkins was just one recruiter in a much larger operation." Alexander felt the familiar weight of national security responsibility settling on his shoulders. What do you need from us? Stewart thinks Blake's arrest was just bad luck. He doesn't know we've identified his entire organization. We want to use your company as bait to draw him out into the open. Absolutely not, Alexander said immediately. I won't put Emma at risk. Dad, Emma interrupted. What if I could help? I mean, really help, not just watch from the sidelines. General Thornton studied Emma with the same expression he'd once used to evaluate military intelligence assets. You've demonstrated exceptional skills for someone your age. How would you feel about working with our cyber division to help us catch these criminals? Alexander started to object, but Emma was already nodding enthusiastically. What would I need to do? We'd set up a controlled environment where you could monitor Stewart's communications while we prepare our trap. Your analytical capabilities could help us predict his moves before he makes them. It's too dangerous, Alexander insisted. Dad, these people tried to use Mom to destroy our family and steal your life's work. Now they're threatening national security. We can't just hide and hope someone else stops them. General Thornton nodded approvingly. She's right, Alexander. Your daughter has already proven herself more effective than half my analysts. We could use her help, and we'll ensure her safety throughout the operation. That afternoon, Emma found herself in a secured DIA facility, working alongside federal agents and military intelligence specialists. Her temporary security clearance was unprecedented for someone her age, but her results spoke for themselves. Stewart's planning something big, Emma announced after 3 hours of analyzing intercepted communications. He's accelerating his timeline because Blake's arrest spooked him. Agent Henderson leaned over her shoulder to study the data. What kind of acceleration? He's ordering his entire network to activate simultaneously. Every mark they've been cultivating, every company they've been targeting, they're moving to the final phase of their operations within the next 72 hours. General Thornton's expression darkened. That's not just industrial espionage anymore. That's economic warfare. Emma continued analyzing the data streams, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards as she tracked communications between dozens of criminal operatives. There's something else. Stewart's been planning to eliminate Blake all along. He never intended for Blake to survive this operation. What do you mean? Alexander asked. Emma pulled up a series of coded messages between Stewart and his lieutenant, Miguel York. They're planning to make Blake's death look like a suicide in prison. Stewart can't afford to let Blake testify about the larger organization. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Blake Jenkins wasn't just a con artist. He was a dead man walking, and only Emma's investigation had uncovered the timeline for his murder. We need to move fast, General Thornton decided. Emma, how quickly can you trace Stewart's location? Give me 30 minutes, Emma replied, already pulling up new data streams. And Dad, when this is over, we're going to need to have a serious conversation about my future career plans. Alexander looked at his 11-year-old daughter, who was casually coordinating with federal agents to stop a national security threat, and realized their family dynamic had changed forever. Emma Sanford wasn't just his daughter anymore. She was his partner in a war that was just beginning. Chapter 6, The Gambit. Stewart's compound in the Catskill Mountains was a fortress disguised as a luxury retreat. Emma's digital infiltration had revealed a sophisticated operation, 24-hour security, encrypted communications, and enough firepower to hold off a small army. But it also revealed Stewart's weakness, his arrogance. He thinks he's untouchable, Emma explained to the tactical team assembled in the DIA Mobile Command Center. Stewart believes his network is too sophisticated for law enforcement to penetrate. He's never considered that an 11-year-old could outthink his security systems. General Thornton studied the compound schematics Emma had assembled from satellite imagery and hacked security feeds. What's our entry strategy? We don't need an entry strategy, Emma replied with a smile that would have made Sun Tzu proud. We're going to make Stewart come to us. Her plan was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than assault Stewart's fortress, they would use his own paranoia against him. Emma had identified a pattern in Stewart's communications. Whenever he felt threatened, he attempted to eliminate the threat through direct action rather than strategic withdrawal. Steward's organization depends on secrecy and misdirection, Emma explained. If we force him into the open, make him choose between protecting his network and protecting himself, he'll choose himself every time. Alexander felt a mixture of pride and terror watching his daughter orchestrate a federal operation. What exactly are you planning to do? Emma's fingers danced across her keyboard, initiating a sophisticated cyber attack against Steward's communication network. I'm going to make him think Blake is cooperating with the FBI. That Blake is revealing everything about the organization in exchange for a reduced sentence. Within minutes, Emma had fabricated convincing evidence of Blake's supposed cooperation, leaked interrogation transcripts, fabricated witness statements, and doctored federal documents showing Blake had been moved to protective custody. Steward will panic, Emma continued. He'll try to eliminate Blake before he can testify, which means he'll have to leave his compound and expose himself to capture. Agent Henderson watched Emma's deception unfold with professional admiration. You're forcing him to choose between certain capture later and possible capture now. Exactly. And Steward's psychological profile suggests he'll always choose immediate action over patient strategy. The trap worked faster than anyone expected. Within 2 hours of Emma's fabricated intelligence hitting Steward's network, his communications exploded with panicked activity. He was mobilizing his entire organization for what he believed would be Blake's rescue and elimination. He's moving, General Thornton announced, monitoring satellite feeds from Steward's compound. 12 vehicles, approximately 30 operatives. They're heading toward the federal detention center where Blake is being held. But Blake wasn't at the detention center anymore. Acting on Emma's recommendation, he'd been transferred to a secure facility 50 miles away, while federal agents prepared an elaborate ambush at his supposed location. This is either brilliant or catastrophic, Alexander muttered, watching dozens of federal agents take positions around the detention center. It's brilliant, Emma replied confidently. Steward's walking into a trap because he can't conceive of someone outsmarting his organization. His arrogance is his weakness. At 3:47 p.m., Steward's convoy approached the federal detention center, heavily armed and expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by federal agents, military personnel, and enough firepower to end their criminal enterprise permanently. The firefight lasted 17 minutes. When the smoke cleared, Steward was in custody, 6 of his operatives were dead, and the rest were facing federal charges that would keep them in prison for the next century. But Emma's victory came with an unexpected complication. Dad, we have a problem, she announced, monitoring news feeds from her mobile station. Nicole's lawyers are claiming she was an unwilling victim of Blake's organization. They're saying she was coerced and manipulated, that she never intended to commit crimes. Alexander felt his jaw clench. Even in custody, Nicole was trying to manipulate the system, portraying herself as another victim rather than accepting responsibility for her choices. The media's buying it, Emma continued, showing him news coverage that painted Nicole as a suburban housewife who'd fallen victim to a sophisticated criminal organization. They're calling her America's most deceived wife and suggesting she deserves sympathy rather than prosecution. Can her lawyers make it stick? Emma's analysis was thorough and depressing. Maybe. Blake's dead. Steward had him killed in prison yesterday. Made it look like suicide, just like we predicted. Without Blake's testimony, Nicole's lawyers can claim she was psychologically manipulated into participating. Alexander studied the legal analysis Emma had prepared, recognizing the possibility that Nicole might escape serious consequences for her betrayal. The woman who tried to destroy their family could potentially walk free while painting herself as a victim. There's something else, Emma said quietly. Mom's lawyers want to meet with us. They're proposing a deal. What kind of deal? Nicole testifies against Steward's organization in exchange for reduced charges. She'd serve 2 years maximum, probably 18 months with good behavior. And Emma paused, clearly struggling with the next part. They want to arrange supervised visitation with me. Alexander felt fury building in his chest. Absolutely not. Dad, I need to hear what they're offering. Not because I want to see Mom, but because I need to understand what we're dealing with legally. That evening, Alexander and Emma sat across from Nicole's defense team in a sterile conference room. Nicole herself looked haggard, her designer clothes replaced with an orange jumpsuit, her perfect hair limp and unwashed. Alexander, thank God, Nicole began, tears streaming down her face. I know how this looks, but I never meant for any of this to happen. Blake manipulated me, convinced me you didn't love me anymore. I was vulnerable and stupid, but I never wanted to hurt you or Emma. Emma's response was surgically precise. Mom, you photographed Dad's financial documents, copied his passwords, and transferred almost $1 million to a criminal organization. That's not manipulation. That's active participation in theft. Nicole's lawyer, a well-dressed woman named Cara Joyce, quickly intervened. Emma, we understand you're angry, but your mother was the victim of sophisticated psychological manipulation. She believed she was leaving an unhappy marriage, not committing crime. The financial records say otherwise, Emma replied, producing a tablet with detailed analysis of Nicole's actions. Mom accessed Dad's accounts 17 times over 3 months. She researched account balances, transfer limits, and security protocols. This wasn't impulsive behavior. It was systematic planning. Alexander watched his wife crumble as Emma methodically destroyed her defense strategy. Nicole had underestimated her daughter, just as she'd underestimated her husband. The deal is off the table, Alexander announced, standing to leave. Nicole will face the full consequences of her choices. As they walked toward the exit, Nicole's desperate voice followed them. Emma, please. I'm your mother. Don't let your father turn you against me. Emma stopped and turned back, her 11-year-old face showing wisdom far beyond her years. Mom, you turned me against you the day you chose a stranger over our family. Dad didn't have to do anything except love me unconditionally while you were planning to abandon us. The drive home was quiet until Emma finally spoke. Dad, I need to tell you something. The reason I was able to track Blake so effectively, the reason I knew how to coordinate with the FBI. What is it? I've been in contact with Grandpa Sanford. Alexander's father had been a CIA operative for 30 years before retiring to a quiet life in Montana. Alexander had limited contact with him, believing his father's world was too dangerous for family involvement. Grandpa's been teaching me things: analysis techniques, investigation methods, how to think like an intelligence officer. He said our family has a responsibility to protect what matters, and sometimes that means fighting wars other people can't see. Alexander felt pieces clicking into place. Emma's sophisticated skills, her tactical thinking, her ability to coordinate with federal agencies. She'd been trained by one of the most experienced intelligence officers in American history. How long has this been going on? Since I was 9. Grandpa said I had the mind for it, and that someday our family might need someone who could fight in the shadows. Alexander realized his father had been preparing Emma for exactly this kind of war, understanding threats that Alexander himself had been too naive to see. Do you regret it? He asked his daughter. Emma considered the question seriously. I regret that Mom made choices that forced me to become this person so young. But I don't regret protecting our family. And I don't regret learning that sometimes love means being willing to fight for the people who matter. As they pulled into their driveway, Alexander looked at his 11-year-old daughter and realized she was no longer a child. Emma Sanford had become something else entirely, a protector, a strategist, and his most trusted ally in a world more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The war was ending, but Emma's education and survival was just beginning. Chapter 7. Consequences. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Manhattan buzzed with media attention as Nicole Sanford's sentencing hearing approached. Despite her lawyer's best efforts, the evidence Emma had assembled proved insurmountable. Nicole faced 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy charges. Alexander sat in the gallery with Emma, watching his wife of 15 years learn the price of betrayal. Nicole had aged dramatically during her imprisonment, the designer clothes and professional styling replaced by the harsh reality of federal custody. Mr. Sanford The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Suzanne Bond, approached during a recess. I wanted to thank you and Emma personally. Your investigation and cooperation were instrumental in dismantling Stewart's entire organization. Emma's work had indeed been extraordinary. Her analysis had led to the arrest of 43 operatives across 12 states, the recovery of over $30 million in stolen assets, and the protection of dozens of potential victims. The FBI had offered her a consulting position when she turned 18, an unprecedented honor for someone barely in middle school. How are you holding up? Attorney Bond asked Emma directly. I'm fine, Emma replied with the calm confidence that had become her trademark. Justice delayed isn't justice denied if it's finally served correctly. When court reconvened, Judge Oliver Tran reviewed Nicole's case with evident distaste. Despite character witnesses and psychological evaluations claiming Nicole had been manipulated, the evidence told a different story. Mrs. Sanford, Judge Tran began, your defense team has argued that you were a victim of sophisticated manipulation. However, the evidence shows careful planning, systematic theft, and conscious participation in criminal activity over several months. Nicole began weeping as the judge continued, but Emma watched impassively. Alexander wondered if his daughter felt any sadness seeing her mother's destruction, but Emma's expression revealed nothing. The court sentences Nicole Sanford to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will also pay restitution of $847,000 plus interest and court costs. Nicole collapsed, her sobs echoing through the courtroom. Her mother, Mildred Knapp, cried out from the gallery, but Emma remained unmoved by the family drama surrounding them. As they left the courthouse, Nicole's mother confronted Alexander in the parking lot. You destroyed her, Mildred screamed. Nicole made one mistake, and you turned that child against her own mother. Emma stepped forward before Alexander could respond. Grandma Knapp, Mom didn't make one mistake. She made hundreds of calculated decisions to steal from our family and abandon us for a criminal. I didn't turn against her. She earned my opposition through her choices. Mildred looked at her granddaughter with confusion and hurt. Emma, you're just a little girl. You don't understand adult relationships, how complicated marriage can be. I understand that loyalty matters, Emma replied firmly. I understand that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. And I understand that actions have consequences, even when those consequences hurt. That evening, Alexander found Emma in his office, reviewing financial reports for Sanford Cybersecurity. Her temporary security clearance had led to several government contracts, and the company's value had tripled in the past 6 months. Any regrets? Alexander asked, settling into the chair beside her. Emma considered the question with her characteristic thoroughness. I regret that Mom wasn't the person we needed her to be. I regret that she chose destruction over growth, betrayal over loyalty. But I don't regret stopping her. She pulled up a news article about Blake's death in prison, officially ruled a suicide, but clearly orchestrated by Stewart's organization. Blake thought he was smart enough to play everyone, Emma continued. He manipulated Mom into thinking she was choosing love over money, when really she was choosing theft over family. But he never realized he was just as expendable to Stewart as Mom was to him. Alexander studied his daughter's analysis, recognizing the cold strategic thinking that had made her so effective against their enemies. The FBI wants to accelerate my consulting timeline, Emma announced. Agent Henderson thinks I could help with cases involving financial crimes and family manipulation. You're 11 years old, Emma. You should be worried about homework and friendships, not federal investigations. Emma's smile carried a maturity that broke Alexander's heart. Dad, I stopped being a normal 11-year-old the day I realized Mom was planning to destroy our family. I can't go back to being innocent. I can only choose how to use what I've learned. 3 weeks later, Alexander received an unexpected visitor. General Thornton arrived at their home on a Saturday afternoon, wearing civilian clothes, but carrying the bearing of a career military officer. Emma around? He asked. She's in her room, probably designing new security protocols or analyzing international crime patterns, Alexander replied wryly. When Emma joined them, General Thornton's expression was serious. I have a proposition for both of you. The Department of Defense is creating a new civilian consulting program for exceptional analytical minds. We'd like Emma to participate. What kind of participation? Alexander asked suspiciously. Nothing dangerous, Thornton assured them. Emma would work with our analysts on financial crime patterns, help identify threats to defense contractors, and assist with cybersecurity assessments. All from secure facilities with appropriate supervision. Emma's eyes lit up with interest. Would I be helping protect other families like ours? Exactly. Steward's organization was just one example of how criminals target successful families and corporations. We need people who can think like they do, identify their patterns before they can act. Alexander looked at his daughter, recognizing her excitement about the opportunity. Emma had found her calling in the intersection of justice and analysis, and denying her that path would be like caging a bird designed for flight. Part-time only, Alexander negotiated, and Emma maintains normal schooling and social activities. Of course, Thornton agreed. We want to develop her skills, not consume her childhood. That night, as Alexander tucked Emma into bed, she handed him a letter she'd written but never sent. What's this? A letter to Mom. I wrote it after the sentencing, but I don't think I'll ever send it. Alexander read the letter, finding in it a wisdom that humbled him. Mom, I hope someday you understand that I didn't choose Dad over you. I chose loyalty over betrayal, truth over deception, family over selfishness. You taught me important lessons, just not the ones you intended. You showed me that love without loyalty is just manipulation, that promises without commitment are just lies, and that family means fighting for each other, not against each other. I forgive you for not being strong enough to be the mother I needed, but I'll never forget the lesson you taught me about the cost of betrayal. Maybe someday we can have a relationship again, but it will have to be built on honesty this time, and I'm not sure you're capable of that level of growth. I love who you could have been, and I grieve for the family we could have had, but I'm proud of the family Dad and I have built from the ashes of your choices. Alexander handed the letter back, his throat tight with emotion. That's incredibly mature, sweetheart. I learned from the best, Emma replied, echoing words she'd spoken months ago with different implications. You taught me that love means protecting the people who matter, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. As Alexander turned off the lights, Emma's voice followed him into the darkness. Dad, we're going to be okay. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Alexander believed her. Emma Sanford had proven herself capable of extraordinary things, and their partnership had grown stronger through trials that would have destroyed a weaker family. The war was ending, but their future was just beginning. Chapter 8. Reckoning. 1 year after Nicole's sentencing, Alexander received a call that changed everything. Nicole had been attacked in federal prison, beaten so severely that she'd spent 3 weeks in a medical facility. The attack wasn't random. It was orchestrated by associates of Steward's organization, seeking revenge for her cooperation with federal prosecutors. She's asking to see you, Agent Henderson explained during an encrypted phone call. The warden thinks she might have information about remaining threats to your family. Alexander found Nicole in a secure wing of the federal medical facility, her face still bearing the evidence of her assault. The woman who'd once commanded attention with her beauty now looked fragile and broken. Thank you for coming, Nicole whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had been recently removed. The agent said you had information about threats. Nicole's laugh was bitter. Always straight to business. I forgot how efficiently your mind works. She struggled to sit up, wincing from broken ribs. Alexander, there are things about Steward's organization I never told the prosecutors. Things that put you and Emma in danger. What things? Steward wasn't just running financial scams. He was selling intelligence to foreign governments, corporate secrets to competitors, personal information to anyone willing to pay. Your company's security protocols, your client list, your government contracts. All of it was compromised through my access. Alexander felt cold dread settling in his stomach. How much did you give them? Everything they asked for, Nicole replied, tears streaming down her damaged face. I thought I was just proving my love for Blake, showing him I was committed to our future. I didn't understand I was selling out our country's cybersecurity infrastructure. The implications were staggering. Sanford's cybersecurity protected critical infrastructure systems, financial networks, and government communications. If hostile foreign intelligence services had access to Alexander's protocols, national security was compromised on a massive scale. There's more, Nicole continued. Stewart had contingency plans. If his organization was compromised, he arranged for retaliation against the families of anyone who cooperated with law enforcement. Emma's in danger, Alexander. They know about her role in exposing their network. That evening, Alexander's home was transformed into a fortress. Federal agents established a security perimeter while Emma worked with DIA analysts to assess the scope of the intelligence breach. It's worse than Mom described, Emma announced, studying intercepted communications from known foreign intelligence assets. They've been using Dad's security protocols to penetrate Allied networks across 3 continents. General Thornton arrived within hours, bringing additional security specialists and a grim expression. We're looking at a potential catastrophic intelligence failure. Every system Alexander's company has protected could be compromised. Emma's analysis revealed the full scope of Stewart's operation. Using Nicole's stolen information, foreign intelligence services had gained access to military communications networks, financial system protocols, and infrastructure control systems across multiple Allied nations. We need to assume every security protocol is compromised, Emma reported. Dad's going to have to rebuild his entire company's methodology from scratch. But Emma had also identified an opportunity. The foreign intelligence services think they have permanent access to our systems. They don't know we've identified the breach. We could feed them false information, use their own intelligence gathering against them. Alexander recognized the tactical brilliance of Emma's suggestion, a classic double-agent operation, but conducted through cybersecurity rather than human assets. What are you proposing? General Thornton asked. We let them think their access is still secret while we feed them carefully crafted misinformation, Emma explained. False security protocols, fake client lists, fabricated vulnerability assessments. We turned Stewart's intelligence theft into our intelligence weapon. The operation Emma designed was breathtakingly sophisticated. Over the next 6 months, Alexander's company would appear to conduct normal business, while actually feeding false information to foreign intelligence services. Enemy hackers would receive fake security protocols that actually increase system security, false vulnerability reports that led them away from real weaknesses, and fabricated client information that helped friendly intelligence services identify hostile assets. It's poetic justice, Emma observed during one of their planning sessions. Mom tried to use Dad's work to steal from our family. Now we're using her betrayal to protect our country. But the operation required one final element: Nicole's continued cooperation. Despite everything she'd done, Nicole was the only person who could provide authentic details about Stewart's communication methods and intelligence protocols. I need to see her again, Alexander told General Thornton. If we're going to make this work, Nicole has to actively participate in the deception. The second meeting with Nicole was different. Instead of broken and pleading, she appeared focused and determined. The attack in prison had finally shown her the real consequences of her choices. I want to help, Nicole said before Alexander could speak. Not because I think it will reduce my sentence or earn forgiveness, but because I need to fix what I broke. Alexander studied his wife's face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving motivation. Instead, he saw something he hadn't expected: genuine remorse and determination to make amends. It's dangerous, Alexander warned. If Stewart associates realize you're actively working against them, they'll try to kill you. They're going to try anyway, Nicole replied pragmatically. At least this way, my death might serve some purpose. Emma's voice came through Alexander's earpiece. She was monitoring the conversation from a secure facility nearby. Dad, her psychological stress indicators suggest she's being honest. Mom's finally accepting responsibility instead of seeking sympathy. Over the next 8 months, Nicole became an active asset in the counterintelligence operation. From her secure federal facility, she provided detailed information about Stewart's methods, helped craft convincing false intelligence, and maintained contact with remaining foreign assets who believed she was still a compromised source. The operation exceeded all expectations. Foreign intelligence services spent millions of dollars on useless information, while their actual intelligence gathering was compromised by security protocols they believed were vulnerable. Several hostile foreign agents were identified and neutralized, and critical infrastructure systems became more secure than ever before. But success came with a personal cost. Working closely with Nicole forced Alexander to confront the reality that his wife wasn't simply a victim or a villain. She was a complex person who'd made catastrophic choices and was now trying to rebuild her integrity from nothing. "Do you still love her?" Emma asked one evening as they reviewed operation reports. Alexander considered the question carefully. "I love the person she could have been. I grieve for the family we should have had. But I can't love someone who chose to betray the people who trusted her most." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "That's fair. Love should be earned through actions, not assumed through relationships." 6 months later, the counterintelligence operation concluded with unprecedented success. Foreign intelligence services had been fed so much false information that their entire understanding of American cybersecurity capabilities was fundamentally flawed. Several hostile nations had restructured their cyber warfare programs based on fabricated intelligence, actually making their own systems more vulnerable to American penetration. Nicole's cooperation had been essential to the operation's success, but it came with a price. 2 weeks after the operation ended, she was found dead in her cell, officially ruled a suicide, but clearly orchestrated by Stewart's remaining associates. Alexander felt no grief at Nicole's death, only a hollow sense of justice finally served. Emma's reaction was more complex. She died trying to fix what she broke. Emma observed during Nicole's memorial service, attended only by Alexander, Emma, and a few federal agents who'd worked with her. That doesn't erase her betrayal, but it means something. Alexander looked at his 13-year-old daughter, now officially consulting with multiple federal agencies and recognized as one of the most gifted analytical minds in American intelligence services. "Do you think she found redemption?" Emma considered the question with her characteristic thoroughness. "I think she found purpose. Whether that's the same as redemption, I don't know. But she died protecting our family instead of betraying it. That has to count for something." As they drove home from the cemetery, Alexander realized their war was finally ending. Stewart's organization had been dismantled, foreign intelligence threats had been neutralized, and Nicole had paid the ultimate price for her choices. The cost had been enormous. Their family, Nicole's life, years of danger and conflict. But they had survived, grown stronger, and emerged as protectors rather than victims. Emma was no longer the innocent child she'd been 2 years ago, but she'd become something more valuable, a guardian capable of protecting what mattered most. The war was over. Now they could build the future they'd fought to protect. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 2 years after Nicole's death, Alexander stood in the headquarters of Sanford Security Solutions, watching Emma present a cybersecurity analysis to a room full of Pentagon officials. At 15, she was the youngest consultant in Department of Defense history, and her reputation for identifying threats that escaped traditional analysis had made her services indispensable. "The beauty of modern warfare," Emma explained to the assembled officials, "is that it's fought by ordinary people who don't even realize they're soldiers. Every social media post, every financial transaction, every family relationship becomes potential ammunition in the wrong hands." Alexander marveled at his daughter's transformation. Emma had grown into a brilliant young woman who understood the intersection of human psychology and national security better than intelligence officers with decades of experience. Her childhood had been stolen by Nicole's betrayal, but she transformed that loss into a calling that protected countless other families. "The next generation of threats won't come through traditional military channels," Emma continued. "They'll come through compromised families, manipulated relationships, and exploited trust. We need to prepare for an enemy that weaponizes love against us. After the presentation, General Thornton approached Alexander privately. Your daughter is remarkable. We've never seen analytical capabilities like hers. She's been through experiences that would break most adults, Alexander replied. Emma learned early that survival requires understanding your enemies better than they understand themselves. The company Alexander had rebuilt from the ashes of Nicole's betrayal now employed over 200 specialists and protected critical infrastructure across multiple continents. But more importantly, it had become a training ground for young analysts who understood that cybersecurity was fundamentally about protecting human relationships rather than just computer systems. Emma had designed the company's core philosophy. Security isn't about building better walls. It's about understanding what motivates people to tear them down. That evening, Alexander found Emma in her laboratory, working on what she called Project Safeguard, a comprehensive early warning system designed to identify families being targeted by criminal organizations before the manipulation could take hold. How's it coming? Alexander asked. Better than expected, Emma replied, showing him algorithms that could analyze financial patterns, communication changes, and behavioral modifications to predict when someone was being targeted for recruitment by criminal organizations. The system would have identified Mom's vulnerability 18 months before Blake ever contacted her, Emma explained. It looks for patterns that indicate someone is emotionally isolated, financially vulnerable, or psychologically susceptible to manipulation. Alexander studied his daughter's work, recognizing technology that could revolutionize family protection. You're trying to prevent other children from going through what you experienced. Exactly. No kid should have to become a counterintelligence specialist to protect their family. Emma's work had attracted attention from beyond government circles. Universities wanted to study her analytical methods. Corporations sought her consulting services, and international law enforcement agencies requested her assistance with complex financial crimes. But Alexander was most proud of Emma's decision to establish the Nicole Sanford Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provided support for children whose families have been targeted by criminal organizations. Why use her name? Alexander had asked when Emma first proposed the foundation. Because Mom's biggest failure was that she couldn't see the impact of her choices on other people, Emma had replied. This foundation helps kids understand that they're not responsible for their parents' mistakes, but they can choose how to respond to those mistakes. The foundation had already helped dozens of families recover from various criminal targeting schemes, providing psychological support, financial assistance, and practical security advice. On Emma's 16th birthday, Alexander gave her a gift that symbolized how far they'd traveled together, a replica of Sun Tzu's Art of War, bound in leather with her name embossed on the cover. You've mastered the principles, Alexander told her. But more importantly, you've learned to apply them with wisdom rather than just strategy. Emma smiled, holding the book that had started her journey toward understanding conflict and protection. I've been thinking about college applications. MIT has a program that combines cybersecurity with international relations. You could get into any school in the world, Alexander observed. I know, but I want to study somewhere that will help me build bridges between technology and human psychology. The future is going to require people who understand both. That night, as Alexander reviewed security reports in his home office, Emma joined him with 2 cups of coffee, a ritual they developed during the long nights of their war against Stewart's organization. Dad, do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if Mom had made different choices? Alexander considered the question, looking at his remarkable daughter who'd been forged in the fire of betrayal and emerged stronger than anyone had the right to expect. I think we would have been comfortable, Alexander replied. Safe, ordinary, unremarkable. Nicole's betrayal destroyed that life, but it also forced us to become people capable of protecting others from similar threats. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I've been analyzing the families we've helped through the foundation. The kids who recover best aren't the ones who pretend the trauma never happened. They're the ones who transform their experience into purpose. Is that what you've done? I think so. I can't change the fact that my mother chose a criminal over her family. but I can make sure other kids don't face the same choice alone. Alexander looked at Emma, brilliant, compassionate, and absolutely loyal, and realized she'd become everything Nicole could never be. A person who understood that love required sacrifice, that family meant protection, and that strength came from serving something larger than yourself. As they worked together in comfortable silence, Alexander reflected on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from their ordeal. Emma's childhood innocence had been sacrificed, but in its place had grown wisdom that would protect countless families from similar predators. Their comfortable suburban life had been destroyed, but they'd built something more valuable. A partnership based on mutual respect, shared purpose, and unbreakable loyalty. Nicole's betrayal had been intended to destroy their family. Instead, it had revealed the true strength of the bond between father and daughter, a bond forged not in comfort, but in conflict, not in ease, but in adversity. Emma, Alexander said quietly, I need you to know that I'm proud of who you've become. Not just your skills or your accomplishments, but your character. You've chosen to use your abilities to protect people rather than harm them, to build rather than destroy. Emma looked up from her computer, her green eyes, so much like Nicole's, but filled with loyalty instead of selfishness, bright with emotion. I learned from the best, Dad. You taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a commitment to fight for the people who matter. Mom never understood that, but I do. As midnight approached, and they prepared to close down their work for the night, Alexander realized their story had reached its natural conclusion. The war that began with Nicole's betrayal had ended with Emma's triumph. Not just over their enemies, but over the circumstances that could have destroyed her. Emma Sanford had faced the worst that human betrayal could offer and emerged as a guardian, a protector, and a beacon of hope for families facing similar threats. The little girl who'd once said, Dad, don't worry. I handled it, had indeed handled it, and in doing so, had become exactly the person their broken world needed most. Their victory was complete, their bond unbreakable, and their future limitless. The last laugh, after all, belonged to the Sanfords. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.